I'm Sandy Barker, romance author, and you'll find my books on the ABL romance page. My stories are all romantic comedies set in beautiful locations, exploring the theme of self-discovery.
Once upon a time. Welcome to Australian Book Lovers, your destination for imagination.
Hello and welcome to everyone, and a huge thank you for joining us for the Australian Book Lovers podcast, episode 14. Our mission is to bring fabulous Australian and Indigenous literature that spans a whole range of genres to book lovers around the globe, as well as fantastic resources and information for passionate authors looking to write their next bestseller. I'm Veronica Strachan, fantasy, memoir and picture book writer, reader, and one of your co-founders and hosts for today.
And I am Darren Kazenko, science fiction and horror author, reader, and one of your other hosts and co-founder of Australian Book Lovers. Very excited to welcome you all to, as Veronica pointed out, episode 14 and another fabulous edition of our industry podcast specials.
Yes, so we are talking today to Teresa Smith. Teresa is the current team coordinator for a fantastic group of volunteers at the Australian Women's Writers' Challenge. And as any of you who have heard our early episodes will know, the Australian Women's Writers' Challenge, I'm just going to say AWWC from here on in. The AWWC was one of the key reasons why Darren and I were having the conversation about getting all of the Australian books together, and one of the reasons behind starting Australian Book Lovers.
Yes, and as far as energy goes, there is an abundance of it in this interview. And
yes.
You mentioned that it's an important format when it comes to resources, and that is absolutely true as well, because not so much for authors, but it is for authors, but as far as the amazing work that Teresa's doing when it comes to arranging all of the author reviews in support, in this instance, of fabulous literature written by Australian women. And I think, what a resource it's been going, as you'll discover, for nearly 10 years now. And just to hear the passion, the hard work that goes on behind the scenes, and just the amount of fantastic book lovers out there that have jumped on board, continue to jump on board and support our fantastic literature by, linking all these amazing reviews, which ultimately is, one of the bread and butter holy grails of an author. And so every review brings hopefully someone closer to discovering these fantastic works.
Yeah, absolutely. And Teresa tells us about the history of the organisation, what it involves, how you can get involved, and how it has really increased dramatically the number of Australian women writers who are being read, which is fantastic.
Yes, absolutely. And I think for all of our listeners out there, this is going to be a super fun episode. Definitely hear a lot of passion coming through. Yeah. And I suspect that by the end of it, there'll be more than a handful of, book lovers out there that may want to jump on board and be a part of the fabulous Australian writers. So the Australian Women's Writers Challenge.
That's it. That's why I was going AWWC.
Yes, AWWC Challenge. Oh, no, AWWC. Yes, it is a bit of a mouthful from my end, but no, absolutely fantastic. I guess just a fantastic community for everyone out there, book lovers, authors, and just artists in general, and that want to support each other and be part of a very vibrant community that really is just moving forward in leaps and bounds.
Yeah. Most definitely. 10 years of supporting and promoting books by Australian women is a really significant part to play in the Australian writing and publishing industry. And it's only bringing fantastic things for readers. So the reader is the winner, all the way through.
Yes, and of course, both yourself and I are also the winners, because it was an absolute pleasure and an honour to be able to talk to Teresa. And as we slowly move forward and record more industry specials, it is, for me, it's been a very educational ride so far. I learned so much talking to Teresa. We've got some great industry interviews coming up still, as well as I believe we've got some great authors as well coming up. We've still got Phil Hoare.
We've got Sandy Barker.
Yes.
Sandy was part of our romance panel, but this is Sandy's very own interview, which is fantastic. Phil Hoare, Yeah, Phil's full of information and lots of history and horror and detective stuff, lots of interesting things on Phil's list. And then Lynn Webster, one of the founding members of the 6am Oz Writers Group, who is a fantasy author. So, yeah,
yes,
three really good author interviews to follow this industry one. Now, Darren, I must have a little word with you, though.
Oh, okay.
I think that you missed out a couple of episodes. You didn't have your quotes ready. But when I caught up with listening to that episode, you might have snuck those quotes in. And they were, of course, Stephen King and H.P. Lovecraft.
Yes, of course. Yes. Well, technology does give a little bit of leeway there to transcend time, shall we say?
Yeah, to the editor goes the spoils, I suppose I have to say.
Yes, in this instance. But
very good.
Yeah, so I didn't want to be left behind.
That's all right. We always have plenty to say. And words are so important, and it's, we could talk for hours. And sometimes we do. Sometimes we talk more before we record, before we press the red button and then think we better get recording, because we are just talking all about everything. Life, the universe and everything would be pretty much
starting point.
Yeah. Very good. All right. Without further ado, let's dive into another industry special with Teresa Smith from the Australian Women's Writers' Challenge.
Yes, and to all of our fantastic, wonderful, exceptionally brilliant and magical listeners out there, thank you for joining us for another edition. Please enjoy this fantastic interview with Teresa, and we look forward to joining you again real soon.
And hello to our listeners, and a big warm welcome from myself, Veronica Strachan. We have a special industry interview today, and I'm coming to you from Wurundjeri land, the Woiwurrung people who are part of the Kulin Nation down in Victoria. And, of course, I have with me...
Oh, sorry, I was going to introduce that. No, and hello, listeners. This is Darren Cousinco, co-founder of the Australian Book Lovers, and I am coming to you from Corner Country today and very excited to talk with our guest.
And our guest is Teresa Smith from the Australian Women's Writers' Challenge.
Yes,
hello, Teresa.
Hello,
Good morning.
how are you?
Very well. And where are you coming to us from today, Teresa?
I'm coming to you from Durrumbal land, and I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. We were very, very thrilled to have you here, because you may or may not be aware that the Australian Women's Writers' Challenge is one of the reasons why we started Australian Book Lovers. I'd been taking part in the challenge for a couple of years now, and was talking to Darren about how hard it was to find Australian books, and we were talking about marketing, and Darren's idea was, wouldn't it be easy if they're all in one place? And bingo, then away we go. So yes, you can say, you are part of the instigation of Australian Book Lovers.
That's fantastic, and really rewarding to hear, actually, because it's always fantastic to know that not only are people participating in the challenge, but that they can see that it's making a difference to their reading, and of course that has the positive flow on of making a difference to the authors who are writing these books and making sure that people get to read them and hear about them.
Yeah, absolutely. So Teresa, tell us a little bit about your role with the challenge first of all.
Yeah, well, I joined the challenge about partway through 2016, just as a participant, like most people are. I also signed up to the emails. Towards the end of 2016, a lot of the team decided to move on, because when you do run something that's with volunteers, people can only give so much time. They move on to their own projects.
Yeah. So
Elizabeth Lewed, who was the actual founder and running the challenge at that time, put out a call out with a number of volunteer positions. And I had found it really rewarding to just be a participant of the challenge. I really hadn't analysed my reading much prior to that point. And like a lot of people who do participate in the challenge, and they say straight away, I didn't realise, how much of my reading wasn't Australian women. And now that I'm aware of it, I'm making so much effort and I'm discovering all these books. Well, that was exactly the same for me. So I responded to her email, being interested in a volunteer. So I initially became the historical fiction editor, which I still am. It's kind of like my special role. I love historical fiction, and I love doing the roundups and seeing what everybody's reading each month.
Mhm.
But since then, I've become the challenge coordinator. Elizabeth's taken a big step back. And so I run the team of editors, also the social media groups, and just oversee any new volunteers, doing their inductions and making sure that everybody knows what they're meant to be doing. So, yeah, it's been really fabulous. I can't imagine not being involved with the challenge now.
Excellent.
It's just kind of me. I guess people now associate it with me as well.
Yes. Well, you were who I went to. Yeah, I thought, yep, she's the one to talk to us about it. So Can you tell the listeners a little bit about, I guess, the background to the challenge and what it actually is?
Yeah, well, it is a challenge as such, but I guess it's kind of morphed also into an organisation, if that makes sense. So it is a challenge that runs every year where we challenge people to read and review. That's a big thing for us too. It's not just about the reading, it's about the reviewing.
Mm-hmm.
Read and review books written by Australian women. And we have a blog, which is pretty much a website, but still called a blog.
Mm-hmm.
But it's got a database where people can link these reviews. It started back in 2012. Elizabeth had decided, there was some talk back then about gender imbalance and women's fiction, not women's fiction, but women writers in general not getting as much coverage.
Mm-hmm.
And she decided to analyse her own reading and realise that she, like a lot of people at the time, had not been reading many women's writers. And when she went to her library even to inquire, the librarian wasn't really able to help her. There weren't many books, it just all led to this idea then that she thought, why not reach out and try and do something about it? And she began the challenge via social media, so Twitter and Facebook, using emails. She contacted booksellers, publishers, book bloggers, English teachers, etc., just to examine your reading and participate in this challenge. That was the first year. It was huge. More than 350 participants joined. The system that she had set up to list the reviews just blew out. It wasn't.
No doubt.
It was just
some familiarity there.
It was bigger than Ben-Hur. Which was fantastic.
Yeah.
So from 2013 on, she decided to really formalise it and started the whole bare bones of what it is now, where we're a team of editors. Some of us are book bloggers, some of us are not. And we all have our special interests of areas and focus on those. We rarely have editors swap genres. Pretty much the people that are in the genres that they manage do that because that's their area of interest.
Right, yeah.
So, Janine, who does history, memoir and biography, is a very big historian. Like, she's got that's her area of interest, and she does it really well. Same with our romance editors. That's very specialised, and usually all of the people who do that are bloggers who really concentrate on romance. Sue Terry, who's been with it from the very beginning, is from Whispering Gums. She looks after our literary and classics. I can't imagine a better person for that role. It's very much her area.
Yep.
So yeah, it's really good, and just every year now we've continued, so that it's not really ever a question now of do we keep running the challenge. It's just what colour do we make the badges and refresh the hashtag, basically. Because it's gone beyond just the blog and listing reviews. We have a really active Facebook group where the reviews can also be listed, and that's people use that as a way of searching for books as well as the database. And then we also have a second Facebook group where people can share their industry events and promote their books and that sort of a thing. And so Facebook and the blog is probably our main presence, yeah. But we just see so many people participating each year. It's really fantastic.
And it's a huge inspiration listening to you tell us about it, considering that it did, the origins were back in 2012. So many, ideas and little organisations that they struggled to make it through that first couple of years. And yet here you are, you're heading towards your 10th year. So nearly a decade is just unbelievable. And I guess it's testament to the amount of determination that obviously has been dialed up and never slowed down since its beginnings.
I think that I find just from my own personal experience in the Australian book industry that it is rather close-knit, and people are very passionate about their areas of interest. And I think I think that even though we rely on volunteers, our volunteers have always been challenge participants themselves. So they're already very passionate about Australian women's writers. Some of them are women's writers themselves, or they're librarians, or they're book bloggers. They're all people who love books and love the industry, and they give it their all. And I think that that is perhaps what makes a difference. Like, the team of editors is just fantastic. There's a lot of effort that goes into managing the Facebook groups too, to keep them very specific to their intent, and to make sure that they're always they never waver from their focus, if that makes sense. And I think that that makes the groups a lot more solid and a lot more interesting for people, because they know that if they're going to be in these groups, well, A, they're going to be welcomed, but also it's going to be what they expect. It's not going to be off topic or this or that. This is our rules. This is what we do. And everybody seems to kind of like just fall into it. And it seems to create this stronger, close-knit community that that seems to be standing the test of time. Yeah.
What are your statistics like? I'm not sure if you've got the 2021, but even if you've got last year's, how many people were taking, or do you judge it by how many reviews that you get? I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, we do judge it by how many reviews we get. Every year, each genre will do a breakdown of what their reviews, review numbers were, and their reviewers and everything. I suppose rather than overall numbers for 2020, I mean, I've got a couple of indications of what they're like each month. So like romance and crime and general fiction are always huge. Yeah. We're talking about like 80 reviews a month.
Wow.
Listed for those. Yeah, they're very big. Historical fiction is sort of also big, but I'm a little bit more hanging around about the 30 to 40 reviews.
Right.
But yeah, so general fiction will get a lot of crossover, of course, with crime, and a lot of people will label something general fiction too if it's a bit of a genre bender. So that's why their numbers are high. But romance and crime are always been our most popular, and I guess across the industry even that could be reflected in fiction sales. Never really examined it, but it's a possibility.
It certainly is.
Yeah.
And we looked at, we had a special romance panel, and the sales in romance were just astronomical, and 2 Australian romance authors that we had, and 1 budding romance author, that certainly reflected people are voracious. Romance readers are voracious.
They are very passionate. But, even our other areas, so, for example, Spec Fiction, and we've seen a really big rise in Spec Fiction over the decade that we've been doing it. And our editor, Claire Louisa Holness, like she's fantastic. She reads Spec Fiction herself, but she's really inclusive in her roundups as well, and really showcases a great mix of books. Even if she gets similar titles each month, she'll make sure that she's showcasing a lot of different ones so that people can get some ideas. So that's usually around about 10 to 13 reviews a month, which, while it seems small compared to romance and crime, it's actually pretty good for a niche area.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'll admit that I put 1 on my to be read pile because I got Claire's update just this week. and that's for adult Spec Fiction as well. The kids and YA will have Spec Fiction in it too. We try and keep the kids and YA separate, so that most of the time the other roundups will just be for adult fiction. You might see some YA sneak in, but generally speaking, the Spec Fic numbers will be a little bit higher because of that. Kids and YA, it's really interesting. Our editor for that is Ashley Meikle from the Book News. She's really passionate about children's and young adult fiction, again, perfect for the role. She's noted in the last year she's really seen a big increase in books for younger readers and children, especially the diverse and Spec Fiction titles. And YA has seen a bit of a dip, she said. So I'm not really sure what that's about, but yeah. So that's interesting.
Do you mind if I ask, Teresa, with regards to the reviews, which essentially for authors I think is pretty much the holy grail, really, besides the sale itself. So just for listeners out there that may not be familiar with the overall process of your reviewing, is it essentially, so for example, if I read a book and review it, do I link to a review? For example, if I do a review on Amazon or Goodreads or Booktopia or something, and then link it, or is it a separate review placed on, either your Facebook or your blog website?
No, it's a link. So you can just do your review once wherever you would normally do your review. Goodreads is a huge, like we do have a lot of book bloggers participating, of course, but Goodreads is a massive, massive amount. Probably the majority of our reviews linked are from Goodreads. And we're starting to see a bit of Instagram lately too, which is really nice.
Oh, that's great.
They can link their profile. So, there's on our front page of our blog, in the drop-down menu, it's just got link your review, and that's where you pop the book title, the author, the link to wherever your review is and your name, and then you indicate what genre it's for. You can also put any other little subcategories, like whether it's YA, whether it's diverse, whether it's poetry, classics. You can also indicate the publisher if you like, and then you just hit submit. So then us as editors, we get a table which we filter according to our thing. And if you've done any historical fiction titles that month, your review will pop up. I can hit the link and actually go directly and visit your review and go from there, pull quotes from it, count it, list it, whatever I want to do with it for whatever fits the roundup that we're going to do each month.
Wow, that's very hands-on, a lot of work.
Yeah, we have a fantastic person behind the scenes who helps out with the IT, which is really invaluable because there's a limit. You know, when you have blogs and that, you do sort of become a little bit tech savvy, but there's a lot of stuff about it behind deeper that I have no idea about. So it's really good to know that I can email someone and say, hey, what's going on here? Because with the having such a massive database attached to the blog, it does cause some IT issues at times because it's a different type of blog. It's an actual living searchable engine because it's saying that it's not just us who use those review links. People go onto our blog and can search for a title and any review that's ever been linked for that will come up and they can choose to read those reviews. And that's how they can actually, which is the actual spirit of what Elizabeth was trying to create, is it's a resource. Our first and foremost, our website is a resource for people who want to look for books by Australian women and want to read some reviews and find out whether they want to read it or not. Or maybe even we find that people use our site, you know, as educators, they might be looking for something to introduce into their curriculum and those kind of things. So, yeah, that's it is a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
And quickly, when it comes to, for example, women writers, you know, out there in Australia, do you have much dialogue or relationship with authors, or can an author contact you and say, hey, you know, I've just released this book? Is it like, do you do any sort of cross promotion, or do you work with authors at all, or really is it just mainly, you know, focused mainly on book lovers and readers?
No, we do work with authors quite a lot. We will quite often get comments through the blog of people who are releasing books. I always advertise, if they're seeking reviewers, I'll always advertise that in that other Facebook group where we advertise events and that kind of a thing. A lot of it is publicists too. We'll get a lot of publicists, especially your small presses, because they have different marketing budgets and they don't just have mailing lists of bloggers that they can send out to. So I will again advertise in our other Facebook group and say, you know, this is the book. Anybody wants it, contact it. But authors themselves are great supporters of the challenge. We have quite a few authors who have participated consistently for several years now. Kate Forsyth is a big promoter of our challenge, and she always participates and reads and links her reviews.
She's great, Kate. Yeah.
Yeah, and she's not the only one. There are quite a lot of authors, and their support of their challenge is just as important as readers. I mean, they're readers as well themselves. And you know that many authors will advertise what they're reading and do that cross promotion. So yeah, we do have a lot of involvement with them, and I do appreciate that. And like I said before, we do actually have a couple of editors in the past and currently who are authors themselves within the genre that they are the editor for. So they bring something else to the table as well for us, which is really good.
It's so important. As you say, the Australian industry is quite small. So helping each other, hence us, you know, chatting to you, and you're being very happy to chat to us. It's fantastic. All of us supporting Australian readers and writers. So Teresa, can you tell me, in the time that you've seen, or I'm not sure if you, are still in contact with Elizabeth, in the 10 years that it's been going, have you noticed a difference in, I guess, the gender bias in books?
Yeah, I mean, well, Elizabeth still is the overall founder. So, she's very much still involved.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, I guess the thing is, it's for me, I wasn't involved at the start of 2012, so I didn't really note what it was like in 2012 with books, although I can say that for myself, I certainly wasn't consciously reading books by Australian women back then either.
Yeah.
But in saying that, I sometimes think to myself, I probably wasn't actually reading books by Australians as much as what I do now. So the participation in the challenge has not only, for me, made me read more books by Australian women, but it's actually made me read more books by Australians full stop as a first preference.
Yeah. We've got a nice website that you might want to go to.
Yeah. So,
Sorry.
because, I think that other participants might have seen that too. And we have a lot of male authors who are consistently supportive of our challenge as well, which is fantastic. So it's not really actually, we've never been about, women only, not at all. It's really about the Australian book industry. The Stella count has shown an improvement, and I guess that's where we fall back on and have a look at each year too when they release their figures. For me, I've just seen that every year since 2016 when I've been doing it, we're getting more reviews and more participants and more authors sharing information about us and saying, join this group, it's fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We're getting more and more requests for our Facebook groups, especially since the pandemic and lockdown, because I guess people are doing a lot more reading. And we have a question, like a question screening for those groups, just to make sure that it's like a filter.
Mm-hmm.
And the most common answer to, why are you wanting to join our group is just that I've seen, the most common answer is I'm seeing myself wanting to read more books by Australian authors.
Yeah.
I've discovered this author and I want to read more. That kind of thing.
That is so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for me, I think I've seen myself an increase, but that's just like a layman's view. I haven't done any, I do rely on the Stella figures to actually confirm that. And I know that they have been showing that each year.
Your turn, Darren.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I've got lots of questions. I'm
trying not to overwhelm Teresa. Give her a minute to, stop and have a little drink of water and ready to go.
No, what I was curious about was obviously you've got a massive reach across the country and possibly I'm sure you've got some international members as well. But I'm just wondering, have you ever been made aware of somebody out there, one of the members of your community that has said, hey, you know what, I wanted to write a book, but I didn't write a book for reasons X, Y, Z. But after seeing the work you're doing as far as the reviewing and the community that's out there, that inspired them to step out of their comfort zone and write a book. So do you know if you've had any of those sort of heartwarming stories of authors that weren't authors or didn't take the plunge until they saw the amazing support and tools and inspiration from your website and your blog?
Look, I think yes, sort of, in the sense that, no one's ever come right out and said, I was so inspired that I wrote the book. However, we get a lot of people joining the challenge and they say upon joining that they're thinking of writing a book, or they're partially writing a book, or they've written a book and they're almost at the end and they're seeking connection and they're seeking inspiration and they're seeking contact with people just to see, what is the next step and what have I done and is it the right thing and should I continue? We do see a lot of that. I think that a lot of our challenge participants are budding writers or beginning writers or writers who have had the whole manuscript in the desk for a really long time. And, so most definitely, because I think that having written before too, you do seek those connections, not just because you don't know what to do with your manuscript or anything, but you're probably also seeking a little bit of validation, like I've written this. Is it something that people would want to read? So what are people reading? So you look for all that sort of cues, and our group is a great resource for that, obviously, because it has so many participants and they're all reading different things and telling everybody about it.
Yeah, I think it sounds like just an amazing community for authors, like you said, to emerge, especially because it can be such a solo effort, I guess, writing. But like you said, if an author is new or doesn't have those established relationships or any sort of general idea of how to move forward once that manuscript's all written, I think it sounds like a beautiful thing to be able to reach out to, join your group, connect with so many book lovers and people within the industry. So I think that's fantastic. I can see why you're definitely happy to keep doing all that work.
Well, it is great, but I mean, we probably our Facebook group, the Love Reading Books by Aussie Women book group, is definitely more active because that's where everybody is putting their reviews. Mm-hmm. However, the other group with the Australian Women Writers News and Events, I really try to actively look out for things for budding writers for that. So I follow a lot of different things as much as possible. But, if there's any prizes for, unpublished manuscripts or, residencies going, I try and put all of that in that group so that all those people who have joined that looking for a resource for what to do next with their manuscript or their writing or seeking help and mentorship, anything that comes across, I try and put in there so that they can actually look at that and know that, okay, well, I don't have to personally be following all these millions of things that I probably don't even know exist anyway. They will hopefully pop up in this group. So I just follow all the many millions of things that and funnel in there for them.
There are, yeah.
And there are a lot, but yeah. But, generally if you're following the different state writer centres and the organisations, we've got our big ones that we follow. And other authors, they all come through. So I tend to try and make that a resource for people because I am aware that it is a small industry and it can actually be, sometimes that's great, but it can also be hard to break into as well because you don't know where to start and you don't know what to do. Yeah.
That's so cool. So for listeners out there that aren't aware of, obviously of your group until now, it's good to know that it's, reviews play such a big part, but there's also resources there too, which is just, awesome.
Yeah, because part of what we want is for the Australian Women's Writers Network to keep growing with more writers as well as more readers and more reviews. We want more writers too because we all want to keep reading our favourites, but we want to read new things as well. Especially, I've noticed in the last couple of years, our reading for diversity has really increased too, and that's fantastic to see. So we also want to be that resource that encourages writers from all walks of life and at all stages of writing, and make it so that there is some resources there to help them out if possible. There are writer centres and everything that do that, but we just also want to just be able to provide that information and put them on the right direction if they need to, as much as we can. It's all about sharing, I guess, and making sure that all the information is shared, and so that as many people can get what they want out of something that they can.
Now, excuse my sarcasm for a moment, but I feel as though the writing community should inherit or steal the government logo of "We're in this together," because I think this is the only time I've ever felt like we're in this together. Everything else doesn't seem to do that. So but it's such a beautiful thing in the writing community. You're right, Teresa. It can be difficult to. It's still difficult for a lot of people, myself included. But at the same time, it is. It's such a awesome community where people are just more than happy to help out in any way they can, and that's how we build our knowledge. It's especially if you're looking to do things in Australia, because there's so much stuff overseas or other industries that are outside of Australia. But as far as if you want to sort of have a bit of a majority focus on the industry here and being an author and try to be a successful author, there's so much to learn, and all that wisdom and knowledge is majority of that I've learned, and I've still got a ton to learn, but it's come from awesome members of the writing community like yourself, Teresa, and like Veronica and other writers. So it's been great. So I just think it's so awesome what you're doing.
I really encourage people who are writers. I assume you have a lot of writers that listen to your podcast, but I really encourage them to look at within their genre, to look at the support that's available within that, rather than sometimes looking at more generic support too. So, for example, if they're romance writers, the romance writers Organisation of Australia is really invaluable, and there's Sisters of Crime. There's the Aurelius for Spec Fiction. There's a lot of things that are just within genre too, and they're the sort of things that I try and follow as much as possible and put into our group so that people see these things. But yeah, I really do encourage people to reach out to those individual organisations because you will get more specialised help for sure.
And people that speak the same book language as you.
Yes, yes, very much so.
That's right.
And, you know, as being such a small writing industry, you do see there are very big differences between crime writers and romance writers and literary writers. The support available varies, the prizes vary, and, yeah, it's probably good to try and find your tribe as well as being a part of the mass.
Yeah.
Very good advice.
So, Teresa, can we just go a little bit further into the diversity that you're supporting? Because I think this is absolutely brilliant. So let's go Indigenous women writers first. One of the parts of the challenge that I have in my mind, and I also try and read more Aboriginal women writers as well as just Australian writers. Have you noticed an increase in that section of books coming through?
Yes, and I think that can be attributed in part to some of the books, such as Too Much Lip, winning
That was fantastic.
awards.
Melissa,
The Yield. Yeah, The Yield.
Read that one. Love that.
When these books win awards, people read.
Yeah.
When any book wins an award, we will see a massive increase in reviews for it. So when books by Australian women who are also Aboriginal writers win awards, it's the same thing. We see an increase in it, but we also see an increase in other books written by Indigenous women as well, which is fantastic because I think that it makes, I know myself when I read The Yield, it was such an impactful novel and it's really stayed with me.
Yeah.
It gets you thinking, it gets your mind thinking, and for me, it made me seek out more work, not just from that author, but more own voices stories, more stories about our past and about the culture that I may not have up until that point been able to appreciate quite as much. So I see that across the board. We definitely see that, and I would attribute that to the prizes, and then again extend that to just reinforce how important it is for literary prizes for authors, because it's not just about the prize itself, it's just about that actual recognition of their work, and then all of a sudden it gets out there and people know about them.
And like you said, it's not just about the prize itself, but it is essentially it's shining a light on something that, or illuminating something that people might not have realised has been sitting there all along. And you say, oh, wow, I didn't know that. And
that's what the Stella Prize does. We see from the moment that the long list is released, all of those books will start popping up as being reviewed. The short list, again, we will see an increase again. And I would anticipate that we're going to be seeing reviews for the Bass Rock coming in for the next couple of months as well.
Okay, I bought it on the weekend.
Well,
Picked it up in Queenscliff, couldn't help herself.
Yeah, and you wouldn't be the only one.
There you go. Okay.
So, there's definitely, like you just said, Darren, that awareness is probably just as valuable as any prize.
And writers with a disability as well. You've got a fabulous list on the website, and certainly you've got Anna Watley there. Waitley. She'll kill me for saying her name wrong because she's one of our writers on Twitter. It was just amazing to read her book and to just, in the same way as reading, Tara June Winch's Yield, it just opens up a perspective of the truth or the reality for other people in the world that, being a speculative fiction writer, I don't often look at, and having never, not done more history than, the British invasion, I guess, is that I never even entered my mind that was part of me needing to lessen my innate racism, is to look and see what, the truth of those kind of things were. So in that same way, reading about diverse characters in books, it kind of blew my mind.
Yeah, and our diversity section is, it's twofold. We are supporting authors who themselves are diverse, either through disability, lesbian, queer, Indigenous, it's the authors, but then it's also about books with those themes. And sometimes that will cross over, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes, it will just be the book. But it's a twofold thing. We had a Jessica White, who was an author in Australia. She's written Hearing Maud recently. She was our disability editor for many, many years, and she compiled those lists that are actually on our database, on our website there. Yeah, the women's queer and lesbian writers and the women with disability as an additional resource, where you didn't just have to go and look for the books in the same way. You could actually look for the authors, and then where available, you can hit that and go to the author's website or another place where their work is. So that was sort of her nurturing. Since she has moved on to concentrate on her own writing and academic career, we do still keep maintaining that though. So regularly there are people who will list themselves and say that they are a writer. This is their area of diversity, so we list them and we put them on there. Rebecca Boyer, who has taken over as the editor for that, she's really fantastic. She reads a lot of diversity herself. She's really across what people are reading, what books are coming out. She's really terrific. And she's very good at showcasing diversity, if that makes sense. So that, we're not just concentrating on, okay, it's only always about these type of writers, I'm never getting heard. She really does try and spread it around and make it really a resource, because I think that's actually one of our biggest areas, to be honest, the diversity. We get, it seems like a small area if you count the reviews, but it has been growing a lot. But I think it's growing in importance as well. Yeah. And in the consciousness of readers, and they're actually seeking to find out for those experiences. I know myself, there's been some different books that I've read, which I've read specifically to find out about that writer's experience. Yeah. From their own voice and from their own experiences, rather than reading it.
And incredibly important for people to see themselves in books. And, this sort of comes up again and again, is people want to see themselves on the movie screen, and they want to see themselves, in telly, and they want to see themselves in books. So we spoke with Gary Lonesborough, who was our first podcast, and he talked about the fact that, he just didn't see himself, an Aboriginal gay teenager. There weren't books out there. Whereas now there is, and, so many other teenagers who are in that situation can go, okay, there is a book out there for me.
Yeah, our young adult, there's a lot more books for diversity for young adult readers too, and even children. So that's been really terrific to see as well. And Ashley, our children's and YA editor, she's very, very passionate about showcasing diverse works as well, reading them herself and making sure that they're well known. So she'll always pick out. So the diversity roundup stands alone on its own, but we will have titles of diversity that will pop up in YA and probably in classics and literature as well.
I can't imagine a greater medium than a book for members of the diverse community to have a voice and to reach out and let their story be heard. I mean, obviously, you've got YouTube, which is video format, but even that is, watching something you may watch for 5 minutes, unless it's a movie or a documentary, but that you get your attention for a little bit, but it's very different experience to sitting down with a book and actually contemplating sentences, contemplating situations, experiencing emotions. And I think, with today's technology, it comes at a cost, of course. There's a lot of negativity, I suppose, but the positives are that, there's nothing stopping you from writing a book and getting it out there. And because of that, I think it's been, because those people have been able to, or I want to say people that, members of the diverse community or anyone in general, because that power to put out a book is now in the hands of everybody, it also means the power of the reader to discover new things. And then for a lot, I think it's what's wonderful over the last few years, from my perspective, I think what I see is that the diverse writers are discovering that, the readers do enjoy reading those stories. So, and that promotes more writing and then promotes more reading, and voila, so I think, whereas I don't know if that would have been possible 15, 20 years ago, before the idea of publishing a book yourself, or having access to all the different literary agents and publishing small indie publishers, etc. I'm not sure if that was something that would have been possible back then. So, and of course, the Australian Women's Writing Challenge is such a important feature of that technological leap, and putting that sense of power out into the writing community.
Yeah, and I think, you're right. I think that if you look at small presses and self-publishing, I think that's actually put pressure within the industry and with the big publishing houses to actually have more diverse lists. So that's why we are seeing that across the board now, I think. And you don't necessarily have to self-publish a book anymore, because readers, I think, have demanded that varied lists. They don't want to read all the same thing. They're looking for these stories that are from different writers, whether it be that they're looking for disabled writing experiences, or Indigenous writing experiences, or queer, lesbian, gay, bisexual, all of that. Like you said, people are looking for a lot of different types of things, not necessarily for something that mirrors themselves, but maybe for something that mirrors something that's going on with someone else in their life. People definitely do look to books for that. And I think that the major publishing houses have had to pick that up as well. And I think that's a fantastic thing.
Oh, yeah, 100.
We have always tried to support small presses and self-published authors as well, as much as possible. But I've really noticed since I began with the challenge that the range of diverse books coming through are not just limited to self-publishing and small presses anymore. They're really starting to be picked up across the board, which is just, it's only great.
Yeah.
It's a sign of the voice getting louder, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's a sign of the appetite getting greater, and obviously the demand for a greater palette when it comes to choosing a book. I think they're ripping up the old menu in the restaurant, saying, I want that food. You'd be serving the same grub every day.
Yeah, and I think that, you will find a lot of writers too. I guess this is just the next step on from where women writers probably felt like their books weren't being published as much, whereas now I would say that, as a book reviewer, when I get the publicity emails through about what's coming on, it's pretty evenly split between books written by men and books written by women to say that they're being published. So, I guess that we've done that, and now we're doing this, and there'll be something else that we need to find more books on soon too, I suppose. And
the missions continue.
Yeah, and hopefully the more diverse and the more greater range, the easier it makes for everybody to be able to break into the industry, and for readers to get to be so spoiled for choice.
Can I ask you, Teresa, your thoughts about, I had an article from the Guardian, it was about 12 months old, but talked about the Stella count, which you mentioned is Australia's kind of answer to the Vita count, looking at women's representation in literature. So when I kind of looked into it, the Stella count looks at about a dozen journals and newspapers and, major newspapers and book review journals. And while the count had come up to about 50% in 9 of the 12, and this was in 2018, which is fantastic. What the person they spoke to, and I can't remember the name off the top of my head, I think it might have been somebody from Monash Uni, because I think they helped them. What this person said was that there's still a partitioned criticism that was significant for women. So, the books by men are kind of considered a bit more serious, even if it's the same subject matter that a woman is writing about. So, if a man's written about family, that's, it's good. Whereas if the women's written about, it's just women's stories. Do you still think there is that partition criticism? Do you get many men on your website? I guess that's one way to look at it.
We do have men that are participants putting in the reviews on the website. We also have probably more men who are unofficial participants in the terms of like sharing stuff on social media and that kind of a thing. Yep. I do in many ways agree though that exists. And for me, one thing is I have an issue with book covers. the differences of book covers between books written by women and books written by men.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, definitely expand on that.
Again, on the same topic, like you said, though, where you might have a book written by a man that's written about family issues, and men do write books about that, and a book written by a woman on family issues. Like, the covers are going to be very different. The one by the man is probably going to be more serious and grave, and the one by the woman is going to look like women's fiction. So it's already being stereotyped as a book that is written by a woman for women, probably less serious. It's probably chick lit.
Yeah.
And I have big issues with that. I'm a member of a lot of different book clubs on Facebook. I won't name and shame any of them. There is a couple of groups in particular that I don't like the vernacular and the language that's used sometimes with regards to certain books. There's been some books there that I've read that I find are quite serious, written by Australian women, and have tackled issues in very serious ways and have been really insightful and eye-opening, and they've been called chick lit in some of those groups. And I feel like that is just, I hate that term. It's the most disparaging term, because where there is no comparison for a book written by a man, like there's no guy lit or anything.
Bloke lit.
There's nothing. It's just like, it's literary fiction.
Yeah.
That's chick lit. And I don't like that, because
I feel it's
dismissive. I feel it's dismissive, and I feel it's also a very broad dumping category, which isn't necessarily reflective. Yeah. And you will find there will be...
do you think they actually even read the book?
Well, did they read the book? Why?
Yes.
Who knows?
Yeah,
Probably not.
Probably not, no.
Probably not. It's like one of those people that pretend to read the classics that they never have. So
they've seen enough quotes on social media that they can get away with it, you reckon?
Yeah. Moby Dick had 4 legs, didn't he?
I get where they're coming from with that Stella article and in saying that, because, yes, I do actually still think that there is perceptions that exist. One thing with the Stella count that, and they obviously couldn't count everything, but I do think that aside from the journals and the newspapers and the reviews, that's what they're counting. Other sides of it, like all of the social media and the blogging reviews, which are Instagram with the Bookstagram, Australian women are seeing their books reviewed a whole lot more there.
Yeah.
That's not counted by Stella, because it's almost like an infinite type of thing to count. But I think that if you did count that, you'd probably see the percentages of the reviews a little bit higher than what they end up. But that doesn't mean that those perceptions don't still exist.
Yeah. Sorry, and I should say I found that the woman's name, I'm sorry. So Julianne Lamond is not from Monash. She's actually from the Australian National University, and both of those unis do the count. So, yes, apologies to Julianne. I couldn't find your name there with my scribbles, but that's all good.
But when it comes to, this transition, say from 2012, but and with that, I guess obviously there's going to be still trolling and whatnot online, and some people are just idiots in general. But as far as
can't help that.
no. Well, they can. They just choose not to.
That's right.
But for example, I think mainstream media is slowly, but ever so surely, losing its grip and is becoming very insignificant to the point where I can't remember the last time I've actually even just watched a normal TV. And if I do, as soon as the one commercial comes on, I'm either furious or laughing my head off, because I think, who is actually watching or listening to any of this stuff? But do you think that because things are moving to a more open platform, do you think those issues regarding biased amounts of reviews or biased even conceptualization, of women versus men's literature, surely that must be moving in a positive way now?
I do think it would be changing, definitely. I think the biggest thing for me is I just think the industry needs to let go of the whole title of women's fiction. They need to just look at it by genre, not by, women's fiction isn't a genre. There is no such genre as women's fiction. That's why we don't have a women's fiction editor, because it doesn't exist.
That's a really good point.
Fiction. There's literary fiction and general fiction and crime and romance and so forth. It's not, there's not a women's fiction, because there's never a men's fiction. So for me, I think it will never truly stop until the industry gets rid of that, and that's got to come from the industry, because publishers are still releasing books as women's fiction, and booksellers are then still having sections within their bookstores called women's fiction. That needs to go. And I think that once that's gone, we can have, and I'm talking about fiction here, we can have fiction on an even playing field where it's just compared by genre and type instead of who's written it. Because invariably, unless you're Nicholas Sparks, most women's fiction is written by women. And I just find that, for me, I just feel like, that will be the biggest point at which we can leave that behind, and which there's not those perceptions anymore. Because once you take that out of the conversation and it's not a category as such, people won't talk about it anymore. They will just look at the books, I think, based on their merits of genre and that kind of. And because I do think that having something, and with the industry calling it women's fiction, I think it just makes it hard for women writers who are writing books to not be pegged into that. They're not having their books looked on their own merits. And,
I think you're right. And I think there's a very big distinction between the term, Australian woman or women writers, as opposed to women's fiction.
Yeah.
So, two very distinct things. And I have to admit, I've come to this whole conversation, I guess, and this whole concept with my head definitely still got sand behind my ears from being deep down in that sand. I was talking to Veronica a bit before podcast, because I read so many books. Well, not lately, because I'm doing the podcast and the website, but in general, I just read so many books, and whether I'm purchasing online or whether I go to the library to borrow, I don't. I'll have a look at the title. Yes, the cover might play a part, but depending on my mood, and I'll flip it on the back and I'll read what it's about. I can't remember ever looking down at the author to see if it was written by a man or a woman. It's just completely it's invisible to me, because it has no impact whatsoever. But that's me speaking personally.
Yeah.
So do you think it's with this issue, this predicament of women's fiction becoming a term, where do you think it sort of originated? Do you think it was something by the publishing company themselves? Do you think it's
a marketing tool? It's an absolute marketing tool, because it matches a lot of the covers that we see too. Very, very, very popular cover within Australia is the picture of a woman on the front. I dress for the era of where the book's set or something. It's either looking over a shoulder or looking at the. I think we just need to be a little bit more innovative with covers as well. They don't need. Yeah. I mean, you don't go and pick up a Tim Winton book and there's a picture of a woman on the front, do you? Even if the main character is a woman, which he has written books about before where he's got a main character as a woman. It's just not like that. So it's all about marketing, and I guess it's capturing that, they've got people employed who look at who are their main readers of these type of authors and everything, so they're designing it like that. But I do think it's kind of a little bit harmful to the industry, though, and I know it's very frustrating to a lot of women authors who feel like their work is being overlooked or being disparaged as simply being women's fiction, and they're not being taken seriously. I've also seen, I've read some really terrific books by women writers who have been bundled into that commercial fiction, women's fiction category. And I know that there's some of our editors, even within our challenge, who I've said to them, have you read this book by, this author? Oh, no, I don't think that's really my sort of thing. I mean, check out the cover with the glamorous woman on the front. And I've said to them, it's not indicative of the book at all. So there are many of us who are, I guess, we can be cover snobs and we can go, I'm not reading that. I'm looking for something serious. And a serious book is overlooked because it's been marketed as women's fiction. So, yeah.
But it's such a tricky situation, isn't it? Because, for example, for romance, a genre that I'm not overly familiar with, but if you ask me, what in my mind, what I perceive, what I imagine as a romance cover, obviously I have a pretty generic image in my head. And if I go onto online and have a look at a romance collection, all the latest releases, 90% of them will match that generic idea in my head. But the catch-22 is, I guess, if you're a romance author, it's the biggest selling genre out of them all. Would you, does a publisher say, let's break that mold, but then possibly completely eliminate 80% of your sales? Because is it the publishing, it's a catch-22 in the sense of, is it the publishing company manipulating the audience, or is the audience demanding or at least shaping the covers, and therefore leaving, for example, publishers no option, but if they need to sell and make money for both themselves and their client, to promote to that audience. It's such a tricky one. And I'm just curious of your thoughts on that with regards to covers.
I think I think that it's a little bit of both, what you said, both the industry and the people. Romance to me is a little different because that's an actual genre, and those covers are reflecting the content of the book in the same way that crime novels, the covers for those usually reflect the mood and the theme of those books. I guess where it gets a little grey for me is in that general fiction bracket. That's where you will see general fiction titles which will ear towards the side of with their covers reflecting that they're women's fiction, when they could be actually quite for both, And the way of saying this is that we have a lot of reviewers that I know just within Australia who are men and who read a lot of general fiction that is classed as women's fiction. And they sort of feel like they're fighting a battle all the time with each review to say, hey, men, you can read this despite the cover because it's not for women, it's for everyone, And I guess it's in that general fiction area, but I also see it in historical fiction. Historical fiction within Australia is very, very commonplace now for covers to be just the woman on the front, the faceless woman, because she's got, you see the back of her head, the woman with her head cut off, and we're just seeing her cleavage. And it can be totally unrelated to the book whatsoever, because unlike romance, a lot of these historical fiction novels in general are covering a lot of themes. So it's not quite as clear cut as what crime and romance are with the covers. So I think that's where I'm seeing with those books that are classified as general and historical fiction and some literary works, they're being bundled in as either women's fiction, and let's pop a cover on there that's appealing to women, or more serious literary fiction that men would buy. And I mean, I feel a little bit sorry for men. They're missing out on some great books just because of the fact that they're being classified as women's fiction and having those covers on them. I think it's amazing when men, and I see reviews of a book which would probably characteristically look like a women's fiction novel, and the man's come out and said, this is an amazing book, and they've written a review on it. I think it's great. Shows a level of open-mindedness that they're obviously aware of what's going on too, and that there's this whole level of fiction over there that they're missing out on.
Teresa, I can see your passion for the goal of the challenge, which is supporting Australian women's writers. It's fantastic. It's really good.
That's probably why I'm still here, I suppose. It's not something I tire of or waver on, but it's an evolving thing. We see, we see over the 10 years different things that require notice. Back in 2012, it was actually getting women's writing reviews. Now it's a little bit like, okay, we're getting women writers reviews, but we want more of different, you know what I mean? The issues evolve. It's all around women's writing, but the issues definitely evolve, and we focus on different things.
And particularly good support for even more marginalised groups, which are in your diversity portfolio. So what is next for the website and the challenge? Have you got plans for, the next 12 months or 5 years?
Well, we just want to keep on going, actually.
Yes, that's a good thing.
You're doing that pretty good so far.
I'd like to keep on going with a little change to my editing team as possible. So if they're listening right now, they're not allowed to move on.
Yes, well, Rebecca, we interviewed her a little while back, and she was very happy with her. She loved what she was doing. So,
we've got a good fit, Sometimes with volunteers, it's a work in progress. But at the moment, we've got a good fit, and we've actually got all roles filled, which is really good. Sometimes we have to do a bit of doubling up. But as the challenge has grown, I must admit it has been easier to find volunteers, because there's a lot of people, who will be watching from the sidelines and will be going, hey, I will give that a go. But I mean, our aim is to just keep continuing. I don't kind of see a point where we would say, oh, we're not going to do this anymore, and the website would just sit there obsolete. I just think that would be such a shame, and I can't envisage that ever happening. So,
and I think you've taken on a mission without possibly intentionally, but I think the mission to eliminate that whole concept of women's fiction.
Yeah.
maybe you'll be the champion for that. And
that would be
I couldn't imagine any other better champion to do it.
That's definitely an area of interest for me too. But, I think that what the biggest thing to be celebrated and reason to continue the challenge is just that community of readers. That's the biggest thing. There's a lot of people who are, especially with COVID and lockdown now and the world being so uncertain, we're living our lives from home, we're connecting more online. And if we're offering a community of like-minded people where they can talk about books or look for books to read and have this space where they can share reading experiences, I think that's fantastic. And the same thing of being able to just offer some form of resource to both writers and readers alike. That's a good thing, especially as we live more increasingly isolated lives. Who knows when that's going to change? So. And
Teresa, if you don't mind me asking, you obviously have a passion for historical fiction.
Yeah.
And so you yourself do write. What sort of writing projects have you got planned, or got anything you'd like to take on when it comes to historical fiction and its art form?
Probably, to be honest, I'm more passionate about reading historical fiction and reviewing it than writing it myself, to be honest. Mainly because I just have so much respect and reverence for all the research that goes into it and the meticulous details. And I think I'm slightly too lazy for that myself.
I don't think you sound lazy on this side of the thing.
There's a lot of effort in for me, I kind of transitioned from a writer to a reviewer, and I've really feel like I've found my niche now with that. Beautiful. I really, being a reviewer is a form of instant gratification as well, where you can sit down and write a piece and put your heart and soul in it and tell everybody what you loved about the book, and then you can publish it and then you can move on. Whereas writing a book is very, very
it does go on and on.
And
it's a ball and chain, but the ball's got glitter on it, I guess.
And I guess, as writers, we all evolve and change, and sometimes we write one thing and then we move on to write another. So for me, I guess it's more, I've got that more media focus now, where I'm writing reviews. I love writing. I really love writing like little opinion pieces about the book industry whenever I get a chance, and I also really enjoy interviewing authors. It's always great to sit down and have a chat with an author and, pick apart their book and their work, their writing process and that sort of a thing. That's always fantastic as well. Yeah.
And I think reviewers have to be if not the most important part in the whole process, because it is the voice to get authors' works discovered. And it also informs people what they can, look forward to enjoy or when they open a book. Because without a reviewer, obviously that's the holy grail for writers, is to get as many reviews as they can. So your role is so important, probably more important than anything else, because without reviewers like yourself, then our books just sit there completely unknown.
We do have some absolutely fabulous reviewers within the social media community and bloggingverse and Instagram. I keep calling it Instagram, but I suppose I should be calling it Bookstagram. But we do just have some really excellent reviewers, people who put a lot of effort into marketing books for nothing except for the love of it.
Well, you can put our hands up there.
And I really think that, that's just amazing. They just tirelessly continue to take creative photos and write really interesting reviews and share it across all sorts of platforms and make videos about books. And I think that's a wonderful thing, but it is really also lovely to see how much authors appreciate that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And if we've got any listeners out there that do put reviews out, I just need to say you're a legend.
Yeah. Shout out.
Yes, definitely.
Because our database would be empty if they didn't exist either. So, yeah, definitely an amazing thing to do.
And if anybody, what we're trying to get some of our reviewers to do is to do an audio review. So if anyone has done a review of one of the books, the Australian authors that are on the website, just read your Goodreads review out and we will record it and put it in the podcast. And that, at the moment, it's mostly my voice because, yes, sadly, I do read a lot of books.
Well, that's fantastic, actually, because I mean, I know that people are absolutely loving podcasts and listening to them more and more. So, yeah, the idea of an audio review, that's another fantastic thing.
Yeah.
Whole heap of more people finding out about books.
That's it, and they can just listen. They don't have to worry about it. And they can just, tell Siri or Google or whoever to, buy that book for them. You could just keep your hands free completely these days. I'm not quite up to that, but there you go. Teresa, where can people see you? What's your website?
Yes, so in addition to the Australian Women Writers, I do have my own blog. It's just Teresa Smith Writes. Mm-hmm. You put that into the Google bar or you'll find me. I'm Teresa Smith Writes on Facebook and on Instagram and Twitter. I'm Tess Smith Writes because they had character limitations and I couldn't spell my whole name out.
There you go.
But you'll find me there. And that's all about book reviews because obviously with the Australian Women Writers, we're rounding up other people's reviews and listing them, but we don't actually publish reviews on the blog as such. Mm-hmm. So that's the other me where I actually publish all the reviews.
Teresa, it doesn't necessarily start at the beginning of the – it does start at the beginning of the year, but you don't have to wait until next year to begin.
No, really, we just say that people can sign up right up until December. There's probably no point in December because we're wrapping everything up. Yep. But if you wanted to sign up, in the last week in November and knock yourself out and start linking reviews, go for it.
Yeah, very good.
We will have a lot of people though.
Yeah.
And I've seen this just in the last month when I rounded up the historical fiction. We often have a lot of people who will join the challenge and then list reviews that they've written, for the last year.
Yes. Right.
And we'll see this great big insurgent of, like 70 reviews from one person. We have no problem with that whatsoever. If you want to do that, that is really welcome. And we love you. And it makes our numbers look great, but it's also a level of enthusiasm that we really appreciate. If someone's going to sit there and start linking their reviews of Australian women writers for, the last year and swell our numbers like that, that just shows a level of enthusiasm. So
let us know the web address.
So if the web address is just, your www.australianwomenwriterschallenge.com. You can also find us on Twitter by just using the hashtag AWW2021. We just refresh it with the new year each year, but if you put that hashtag in on Twitter, you'll find us. Mm-hmm. And if you just look up Australian Women Writers Challenge on Facebook, you'll get to our main page. But I do encourage people to, if they are interested in joining the challenge or they've joined the challenge but they haven't been in our group yet, if you look for the Love Reading Books by Aussie Women group on Facebook, you can request to join and I will certainly let you in because we love having people join. And if you are a writer who is looking for, any kind of like tools for promotion and that sort of a thing, we have our Australian Women Writers News and Events group as well. It's a group too. So if you just search for those, you'll be able to come up and again request to join.
Fantastic. Teresa, it has been amazing to chat to you there.
Absolutely.
I knew you would be fantastic. There's so much on the website. And I've seen your reviews come through. So we've been talking with Teresa Smith, the historical fiction roundup editor, the Face Groups administrator and the current team coordinator from the Australian Women's Writers Group.
And a reviewer superstar.
Yes.
Thank you very much for having me. It's really been a lot of fun.
Good.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure talking with you, Teresa.
Yeah.
And we certainly didn't run out of anything to say. So thank you. And we will see all our listeners, or we'll hear from all our listeners next time. Take care and bye for now.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks very much. See you later.
Let's meet again when magic happens.
Australian Book Lovers acknowledges First Nations peoples and recognises their continuous connection to country, community and to culture. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and honour the sharing of traditional stories passed down through generations. We're committed to a safe and inclusive welcome for authors and readers of all cultures and backgrounds, including people of LGBTQIA+ communities and their families.